all just from being down there?
Well, there are two things that are going on in the House of Representatives right now. John Boehner is allowing the Judiciary Committee under Chairman Goodlatte to work its will, take a piecemeal approach toward immigration reform. We worked on two bills in the previous week, one of them related to agricultural workers, the other related to interior and border security. Both bills that many immigration advocates and Democrats wouldn't find tenable, but it is at least a step toward immigration reform through the context of regular order in the Judiciary Committee process. Next week, I'm told we're going to confront two additional piecemeal bills. One will be on e-verification, system that would require employers to verify the immigration status of individual workers before they're hired, and the other on STEM workers to deal with the absence of high-tech employment opportunities, or the need to fill those opportunities possibly with highly skilled immigrants. But then you also have a parallel phenomenon that's taken place where you had the Senate Gang of Eight. We originally had the House Gang of Eight, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, working on a comprehensive immigration reform bill that in all likelihood would include a pathway towards citizenship. That House Gang of Eight has now become the Magnificent Seven, apparently because Congressman Raul Labrador has dropped out as it relates to a dispute on health care access for individuals on that pathway. But that said, we're expecting to see a pretty tough but fair bill unveiled within the next few days by the Magnificent Seven, and so that will set up a very interesting dynamic. If you couple that with the fact that if we get a strong bipartisan vote out of the Senate, the American people clearly support comprehensive immigration reform. The president still has a great deal of popularity and the bully pulpit to push this issue. There will be significant pressure on the House of Representatives to do something meaningful, perhaps with a minority of the majority of the Republican conference, and that ultimately will be Speaker John Boehner's dilemma.
Well, and that's what I kind of wonder about, because I look at the farm bill, debacle you could call on the House floor on Thursday, where this thing failed when nobody thought it was going to fail, and you look at the cuts that were in that farm bill. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but there are $20 billion of cuts in food stamps, which drove the left crazy. To see this, it was a huge concession in the eyes of the left to Republicans and to conservatives, and yet you had 6 Republican members reject a personal plea from John Boehner to vote for this because they still didn't think it was conservative enough. So I hear you talk about like the Magnificent Seven. I like that phrase. But if the Magnificent Seven comes up with a proposal that includes a pathway to citizenship, I could see how that gets sold to Republicans on the Senate side. I think we're watching that happen. But I look at what happened on Thursday in the House and I say, could you ever sell meaningful numbers of Republicans on this, or would you be facing a revolt?
Well, it was phenomenal to actually watch what took place on Thursday. I, of course, voted against the Farm Bill because of the $20 billion cut. But you had, as you pointed out, more than 60 Republicans largely vote against it because $20 billion wasn't sufficient enough. It wasn't extreme enough. Wow. So that does speak to the dynamics in the House. But what is important to note is that on 3 different occasions during this calendar year, John Boehner has brought meaningful legislation to the floor on the fiscal cliff agreement, then the Superstorm Sandy aid relief package, and then the more robust Violence Against Women's Act that included protections for the immigrant community, LGBT community, and the Native American community, that passed with only a fraction of Republicans supporting it. And so the question is, does this fall into that pattern of legislative activity where for the 4th time John Boehner can find the will and the ability to bring a bill to the floor that it's in the interest of the Republican Party to pass, even though a majority of the House conference will support it?